All right. I think I'm live. Once again, New Zealand popping up. So psyched the time works out for you guys. Um, Welcome to another episode of Refuge in Practice. This is episode 5, and I'm going to be speaking with my very good friend Jerry Roe, who is a Nashville session pro, fantastic drummer, total chameleon, guy can do anything. He's also in a band with the great Buick Audra sludge rock duo called Friendship Commanders. But really, I'm not going to waste any more time. We only have a limited amount of time. Hope everybody's healthy and ready to get into some drumming and questions. Here we go. Everybody, Jerry Rowe.
How's it going? How are y'all doing?
What's up, Jerry?
Oh, not much. Just hanging out at the house, doing drum tracks and eating lots of food.
Are you going to gain like 15 pounds? I mean, you could gain 15 pounds, be fine, but I
I
think
don't
I'm,
know. I think so far we've lost weight here.
yeah,
uh,
I'm
but
hoping I've lost a little as well. So you said you're tracking at home. Normally, it's hard for me to get a hold of you because you are so busy working in the studio. You're a very, very busy guy in Nashville with all different genres of music, including your own band, which keeps you super busy. So,
yeah,
I mean, were you working today? Were you working yesterday? How much are you working at home or recording from home?
yeah. There was a few day break, and then it pretty much launched right into tracking here when the studios all officially shut down. A lot of label projects were put on hold because I do think they prefer to track in the studio. Labels feel more comfortable with producers having control over players and producers being able to talk with players directly and get what they want. But yeah, I haven't really had a day off except for one or two since.
It's amazing. So, how many, if I ask how many tracks or how many sessions have you had this week, what would you say? I mean, well, how about last week? Because we're in a new week already. But do you kind of keep track, or you get a call and you just do the work?
I haven't kept track. If I had to guess, it'd be something like I did 17 songs.
17 songs in a week.
Yeah,
I think I did one last week,
yeah,
but that's that's the world you live in, man. I mean,
yeah.
you're in the town where that can happen. Well, I understand completely when you say that labels would rather be keeping people in the studio and having open lines of communication. That's obviously really hard right now for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, and but I mean, I'm thankful I have a studio and that I could do this and I can reach out to you and your drums sound great to me. I mean,
Thank
if
you.
this is
Likewise.
if this is any indication, you know what? I say that. I say your drums sound good, but no one's actually heard your drums. So can you do us a quick solid and do a quick favor? And maybe because you were already tracking today, is there any way that you could play something of a little bit of what you were playing today just to give people a taste of the kind of work that you do? Or is that not what you want to do? You can play whatever you want, dealer's choice. But I think
Well, I had a very refreshing track today. I've done a lot of modern country and some Americana folk, but this is what I was doing before we started this. Full on. It was like the Cult meets the Ramones.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Dude, look, I know that you can play anything. I've seen clips of you. Look, sad but true. I don't think I've ever seen you play live
No,
except
we've
except in
always
the
been
studio.
right. We've always been at opposite ends of the country.
Right. You're touring, I'm touring or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like you pass through my neck of the woods and I'm gone on tour. But every clip I've seen has been super, super tasteful. How look, I feel like I've fallen in a genre and a thing where I pretty much uh do my thing. Like I'm not asked to do. I mean, I try and vary what I do. I play brushes sometimes. I'll play with mallets. But I feel like you get asked to do that like tenfold. Like your band, for instance, Friendship Commanders. You play the shit out of that
Thank
stuff.
you.
I mean, you have a powerful, powerful, muscular approach. And then I see you sit down and play with Alison Krauss, Rodney Crowell, Emmylou Harris, whatever, a Grand Ole Opry thing, and you're so tasteful and musical with brushes, and you wouldn't know that the same person exists in that drum set. So I mean, is that something that you were brought up to think about?
Yes and no. Well, it's I'm third generation musician, so my dad and my grandfather were both session players, and my grandmother was a session singer, sang on a lot of sing backgrounds on a lot of big records before she gave it up to be a mom. Uh, and so being whatever I can be for the day was definitely always insinuated.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I was around a lot of country music and a lot of like folk and R&B and like new wave stuff, but uh, hard rock and metal was what was happening for the kids
Of
when I was a
course.
kid. Yeah, it was the new music, so that's all I cared about at the time, really. But uh,
So you know all the Johnny Cash tunes because of your dad playing with Johnny,
right,
but you also know all the Melvin songs because you were listening to Dale Crover, right?
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Man, I think the first record I ever tried to play from start to finish was Master of Puppets, and I still have a lot of that stuff committed to
Excellent.
memory. I
Yeah,
would
the
say I would say I owe all of my knowledge of cymbal chokes to Lars Ulrich.
as there are a lot of those there, and in that era, yeah.
Yeah,
That
seriously.
song I tracked today ended with a cymbal choke. So
Really.
yeah,
So it's funny. We know these things, right? The cymbal choke, the double kick, the brah,
yeah,
whatever, all those endings. Like we have these drum licks, but we can't always use them. It's like we got this backpack full of all these tools we could reach for, but it's a matter of taste, right? So
right.
um, I definitely I admire the hell out of your ability to make the right choices at the right time.
Thank you.
Um, Tell me a little about. I got to ask you about this story. You told me once about. I asked you what it was that you know. I think you're a great player, and we were talking about caliber of musicianship, and especially with studio musicians. And you had mentioned that your dad would sometimes bring you to the studio, and you would just kind of hang out and watch
Yeah,
those guys track. And um, obviously, that was a hell of a room. Like there was a lot of royalty in that room, and for you, it was just recognizing a certain level. I think is how you put it, like a certain
yeah,
caliber. Like I guess this is how you play. This is what you attain to be.
mhm,
Is that
yeah,
true?
yeah. And it's funny too because in those situations, like where my dad was then, he sort of later on ended up doing what you would call A-lister sessions. But when I was a kid, was in a different situation, and so I'd be in a room with a lot of musicians that no one knows the names of, who are easily as good as any of the household names of session
Hmm.
players, and it was definitely just what's required here. It was like in the water, and so yeah, there were things you do, things you don't do, ways you don't act, and the only way to learn that is to be submerged in it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. To get in. Yeah. Definitely to get inside of it. Well,
yeah,
when I first started playing with Death Cab, I think that I was teaching a lot of students and covering a lot of books and curriculum, and there was independence exercises, a technique, and things that we would work on, or I would work on with students to help them develop. But really, when I got in the band, or like when I literally had my audition and I
yeah,
had to transcribe and play other drummers' parts, like Michael Shore, who was before me in Death Cab, and Nathan Good, who was the first drummer in Death Cab, and then Ben Gibbard also wrote some parts and played drums on the second album. Um, it was like my studious brain working out all these parts and
yeah,
trying to be real technical about it. And I'll never forget, those guys made me just throw out the notes, everything that I transcribed, and they wanted me to just play and sort of what you said, kind of be in the room and be a part of it.
yeah,
And it's really easy to wrap your head around those technical aspects and like forget about listening to music, which
yeah.
thankfully I was in a band, and I'm sure that's what you being in Friendship Commanders does for you too, is you remember the dynamics of the band and writing those parts, not just what it's like to be a studio guy.
Yeah, and it is a challenge to shut one off for the other. Um, I'd say I'm happy nowadays to lean more towards the way I think in the band and be able to get away with it.
Well, you're good enough player and people call you enough that they trust you and you could do that. I don't think that a person could necessarily do that out of the gates. Like, hey, hi, I've never done a session. Nice to meet you, Mr. Mrs. Producer. Like, I'm here to work for you. Like, you can't call those shots when you just
Yeah.
walk in a room for the first time. Will you give me an example of a country shuffle? And that could be as broad as, I mean, like, you laugh because you're like, listen to this guy, he doesn't even know what he's talking about, because there's probably like 10 different country shuffles, right? It depends on the player, of course, but if I wanted just a very general country shuffle, if I wrote a song regardless of the lyrics, whatever, what would you play to that?
Well, I'll do three quickies. So here's just the normal one, played with sticks.
Okay.
Hold on. That's like your ballad
Sure.
shuffle. The Buck Owens shuffle, which is kind of nuts, is the Bakersfield deal. And then you're more straight rock one, like a Dwight Yoakam deal. And that hi hat on the upbeats is one of my favorite things that ever happened. I don't know who came up with that, but they're a genius.
It's pretty great. All right. No, I'm going to make you play one more thing. Now, to give people a little perspective of why I respect you so much about what you do, um, can you play me something that you consider challenging as a friendship, like a friendship commander's part that you actually
Yeah.
have to work towards?
Uh, this is a song called Among Monsters. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Able to switch gears just like that. It's amazing, man. Um, I aim for those sort of those abilities.
Uh,
One day I'll get there. um,
uh,
you know what, we joke sometimes as a band, because Death Cab listens. We have a really broad uh, palette for music. When we tour, we always have a turntable and in our dressing room or wardrobe case, and the vinyl collection grows every tour. Matter of fact, we need to start bringing out a road case when we can
yeah.
tour again, just dedicated to vinyl, because it ranges from uh, dub records to jazz records to uh, obscure prog to golden oldies. So it's
It's
to
great.
me, those are the things that make us all better, right? Like,
Right.
what for you? So for me, let me talk a little about myself. This is more about you, but I'll just say to the fans that are out there who've tuned in, who follow myself, not just Jerry. Um, Evolving as a drummer is constant. Like, we have different points in our career or in our practice where we work on technique, or we work on independence, we maybe work on speed. And in Jerry's case, you know, he mentioned from a very early age, like, he was working on listening. He was like absorbing what was in the room. And those are all, you know, big part of how we are able to be professionals, as well as being able to get along with other people in a band, whether it's one
Right.
people, four people, five people. So band dynamics is a real thing. And to me, any band that's been a band for more than, I'm going to say, 5 years, let alone 10 or even 20, like Death Cab, it takes a lot of back and forth, right? It takes a lot of communicating with somebody.
Yeah. Patience and like listening and learning,
Yeah,
knowing when
absolutely.
not to talk, the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
uh Knowing when not to play
Yes.
as well.
It's a big one.
But aside from all those band dynamics, like, where were you? Like, for me, early on, I remember being stumped by the idea of a paradiddle. Like, it just seemed to be complicated as a sixth grader in band to be able to play two singles and a double. And especially when I would see somebody who's been doing a lot longer playing it up to speed. Is there something, and a lot of people, for anyone who's watching who doesn't know what a paradiddle is, just bear with me. It's just right, left, right, left, left, just over and over. And you can move around the drums, you can move it all over the place. But there are there are so many different versions, variations of that. But I think that we drummers settle on licks or like a certain thing that we do. The famous Steve Gadd was known for his six-stroke rolls. Is there
Right.
something that you, Jerry, have sort of carried with you throughout the course of time that you can share with us? That's like a what you see as a valuable rudiment or a thing to practice. It doesn't need to be a rudiment; it could be an actual beat or an independence thing.
Well, on the on double pedal has always sort of eluded me. I've just never been very fast with it, and it was kind of the thing that hung over every drummer's head in my age group.
The
Uh,
double pedal.
yeah, you had to be able to do it. You just had one, and like it's even drummers I've talked to, just like slightly older than me, that they never even owned one, but it's the only kick pedal I ever owned to start with. So I kind of avoided it for a while and decided I hated it, and then it's the thing I've always had to work on, with like speed and independence, and like the part where I did that fill in the last song that where it didn't do what the kick drum was doing. That took a long time to get to, and took me like a year really to nail it. And that's been my Achilles heel, other than just being obsessed with getting single stroke rolls as fast and as clean as possible.
Which you actually do very well. I have seen.
Yeah, in,
So,
in in the recording, like the loud recording world, you can't really get away with double strokes. They don't get out over anything that I'm doing. There's
huh?
like a big wall of guitar, and so
So, can you play an example? Can you do like a single stroke? I mean, it doesn't need to be. I guess what's the threshold when you say double strokes aren't enough? If your double stroke roll is here,
yeah,
like, is that what you mean by
yeah,
threshold? Like that doesn't actually come through?
right. So like this versus, so I'll start with a double stroke and do just single.
Right. Yeah, I hear
Right.
that clearly. One is a lot more blistering. It is
Yeah.
what it needs to be. But honestly, look, I feel like the thing you talk about an Achilles heel, like my Achilles heel is speed. Like I have dynamics, low dynamic speed down. I've got that totally gathered, but my like real muscular speed, I don't acquire until I've been on the road for 6 weeks
Yeah.
or
But
something like that.
same here. Recording our EP was great because we had just played a bunch right up to that point. We were able to get into it. But yeah, it's rough if you haven't been doing it for a while.
You suck wind, right?
Right. Yeah.
No, yeah, there's this thing we refer to in Death Cab, which is tour muscle, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's some blood, sometimes it's some blisters, but
Well,
I
and
think
you have to me you have the nightmare drum parts live in that you have to close the hi hat this way and then do this, and it all has to be in time, and a band is swirling around you, and there's a lot of it's a
you know
lot on you going
it's
into it.
it's not a nightmare. You know why? I
Right.
figured this out a long time ago. I just don't listen to the band.
Huh.
I feel like it's their job to listen to me, right?
But that
No.
traditionally that's the deal, right?
Yeah, no, it should be that way. No, it's not.
Yeah.
I will say this for anyone that's been on tour or that wants to be on tour because it will happen again, or whether you're in a studio, listening and how things sound to you and how you fit in and how physically you calibrate those things is such a huge part of being able to pull all this stuff off. Like,
Yeah.
obviously you can overplay
Yeah.
and waste your hands or waste your feet, cramp up, cause even more damage, carpal tunnel, tendonitis, all that. But I mean, like I know that you have been playing right for a really long time. So we talked about single stroke rolls, Achilles heel being your double bass playing, which is fine. If I had known you're going to have your double pedal on there, I would have put mine on this kit too.
It's always here, ready to go
We could have
whenever.
we could have thrown down some double bass chops.
Right, right.
Um, what was I going to ask? Will you give me a quick rundown? Because not everybody knows, session musicians, whether you're a guitar player, a bass player, a writer, which there's
Yeah,
a ton of in Nashville. You also play bass. You don't just play drums.
right.
Um, Maybe that's your dad's fault. Uh, or did you just pick it up because?
Well, they were just in the house, so of course I had one and took a liking to it.
Yep. And
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. Jerry's dad was bass player with Johnny Cash for how long?
I think something like 90 or 91 until Johnny died.
Crazy,
Uh,
insane.
yeah,
So some of us are luckier than others in terms of having an influence around that's super positive in that way. I did not
yeah,
have any other musicians in my family. I just had to figure it out, and for me, it was whatever my folks were listening to.
yeah.
Uh, but what was I going to ask you? Will you give people an idea of? Would you just run down a quick list of people that you've recorded with in the past week?
Past week I did some sessions for Hardy. I did some stuff for Luke Combs. I did some stuff for this new rock band in Germany. I don't know their name, and
Per-
if I
Perfect.
if I did, I couldn't say it properly. Uh, yeah, and so a lot of stuff for friends, like custom projects coming in. But
Right.
that's those two big ones. Those three big ones have dominated a lot of this past few weeks.
It seems like I had some session work this week with a guy in LA, and it seems like because you had mentioned earlier, some of the major label, bigger budget projects have been put on hold.
Yeah.
That now is kind of a time for a lot of passion projects. Like
Hmm.
people are like, man, I've been really wanting to dig into this or work with this artist or do whatever. Um, it seems like even though there's a lot of supposedly free time sheltering in place right now, which is what we're all trying to do, um, I feel like I'm busier than I've been in a long time. Maybe in part because I've said yes to things, but maybe also because all those back burner projects that people have been thinking about are finally coming to fruition. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel pressure to really amount to something and make something out of this time, which might not be the right move, but uh, they have the time to do it,
Yeah,
and they
agreed.
maybe didn't before.
Agreed. What's your advice to somebody that has just, you know, had no choice but to work from home, to build a studio, to kind of try and give this a go? Like I mean, you already had your foot in the door, so it was just a matter of like, hey, everybody, I'm here, I'm home, I can record. But if you're a younger musician, writer, playing whatever instrument, and you would like to, if you're going to give advice to somebody who wants to kind of do more work, what would you say to them?
Well, you need examples to get work, so I would definitely work on your own stuff and make it as good as possible. And don't worry about not having an elaborate rig. Just make the best of the one you got and figure out. Just use your ear, be confident, and do it.
Right. Because
Yeah,
the performances speak for themselves, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, it doesn't matter how expensive your mic, your preamp, your console, your monitors are if you can't play.
Right.
Or if it doesn't sit right, then no one's going to want to, yeah,
Yeah,
no one's going to want to work with you. Totally agreed. Well, I
yeah,
know you have a modest studio, but I know that it's also got some quality gear in there. But the thing that's most evident to me, even in just this live stream, which is not the same as being in the room with you, is how good your sound is. And I know that comes from just the experience of knowing how to hit and how to get things to sound right from here, from your hands and
yeah.
from your
Well,
feet, not just the gear choice.
and paying attention to engineers.
Of
I've
course.
luckily made I made friends with a lot of the engineers I've worked with. So instead of them bitching about me to other people, they bitch about other people to me, or my tones to me, and I remember what they say.
No,
So
agreed. I mean, it's like, to me, I've always thought about engineering knowledge is like having x-ray vision.
right,
Like if you can walk into a control room and suggest something that is engineers talk,
yeah,
like, can we back off on that compression? I have an idea. Or uh, it sounds like that kick drum's EQ'd. I mean, not telling somebody how to do their job, but I, for one, have definitely spent a lot of time and a lot of hours and probably way too much money investigating how to record drums.
Right.
So I feel like my sound is well represented every time Death Cab makes a record.
Yeah.
Um, that also, having being a very self-sufficient band for the first, I'm going to say the first 8 records, first 7 records, I guess. Death Cab, really, everyone got in and tooled with stuff anyway. I mean, Chris Walla definitely had a big part in being in control room and making a lot of decisions. But
Yeah.
he and I, or Ben and I, or Nick and I, or all of us in the band were never afraid to offer up suggestions or try suggestions. And every conversation we had with the producer, once we got into larger studios with producers, were based on that experience and that knowledge. And we also didn't have any egos about it. We were willing to try things. But I think too, I think you probably attribute a lot of your success to the fact that you've been knowledgeable, doing this at home, around it your whole life. And that's part of the success. Like, if you were to strip away all of your engineering knowledge and knowledge of how to choose the right snare drum,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even want to talk to you, man.
Right. Likewise, man.
Yeah, for people that don't know, Jerry and I go back a ways. We met when I played with the Craviotto Drum Company, and our dear friend Johnny was the one who brought us together. Made incredible drums. We both still have his drums, but we it's not the only thing we use. But
Right.
being able to select gear, know gear, make choices, is huge. It's paramount.
Yeah, big time. And it really takes, I think it's different with everybody. Like the snare drum you end up using your workhorse. Like it's funny to me how different drummers get the same sound out of a different snare drum than I do, and they're sure that's the best way to do it, and they're right for them, and I wouldn't disagree with them because they've done it and it's proof. But
Right.
it's interesting how it's different but the same.
It's proof that there's more to think about than just a cool beat.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, massive amount. I think that. Well, let me ask you this. This is called Refuge and Practice. I think a lot of people have the time to practice, but what have you been practicing?
I'm guilty of not practicing very much because
Which, hold on, I'm going to cut you off. That's practice.
yeah, I guess so. Uh,
You're working though. You're playing. You're practicing arrangements for songs. You said
right.
yourself, for anyone that's just tuning in, you worked on 17 songs in the past week.
Yeah.
So, to me, those weren't things you already knew how to do.
Mm-hmm.
You were practicing arrangements. You may have used your familiar tools to get the job done, but I think.
Well,
Go ahead.
I've really got inside. My tom mic placement has changed entirely. Yeah, it was like setup stuff. That's what I've been practicing, I guess.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, because you're doing so much more engineering at home.
Right. Whereas I'm always showing up at a studio, my drums are there, my card, I just drop them off, and they're just set up the way they're marked. I don't really ever get a time to mess around with it. But this kid has been here the entire time, and so I've really messed around with the sound. I've changed like mic placement, mics, the snare height. It's been making me play more comfortably, and yeah, of course, I've always been getting nuts on myself about playing with a click, but that's a different story.
Okay, playing with a click. Do you feel like? I feel like there are songs that shouldn't be played to a click. I have no problem playing to a click or playing to programming. And if you really want to get nerdy about it, and I know you'll know what I'm talking about, for anyone that happens to have a love of vintage drum machines,
Yeah.
those things move around. They're not solid. You can't record a vintage drum machine and drop it into your computer and have it all line up. You have to do the work to get it to line up. So to play with those things is definitely a little bit wonky and weird.
Yeah. Yeah, the waveforms are edited wrong too. So like snares start a little late sometimes. That's the magic of those.
Do you have any questions for me? You don't have to answer. I mean, you do. You called me. I mean, you called me this, or you checked in this morning. You asked me about camera lenses, but that's whole. Let's keep this. Let's keep this as drums, and then we're also going to answer questions from other people.
What made you? I think you have a very interesting relationship with cymbals. The way you you love to do the foot hat stuff and like hit like break up patterns of foot hat closures across rides and cymbals. When do you think that started, and when did you develop those leanings? Other than
Uh,
just it's very interesting and not what most people do.
yeah, no, I'm blushing. No, seriously, it's a very good question. I get asked that a lot, especially with the hi-hat stuff. It started because of independence exercises I would work on in
Right.
terms of using my left foot. And I would also say that it started because of, if I can find them around here, um, somewhere in here in this pile of cymbals. Oh, here they are. Zildjian would love this. This old pair of 15-inch Zildjian A's
Yeah.
are very, very dynamic, and they're very thin. So they actually, depending on how you play them, they change quite a bit tonally. I'll,
Yeah.
I'll give an example of that to people, but I blame a lot of my left foot and hi-hat uh, approach on this one set of 1965 Zildjian new beats.
I
I
get
think
that.
I think they're new beats. Do you have a piece of gear that has influenced your playing more than actually? Quick footnote: the bottom hat is like a '70s Zildjian A. The top is from 1965 because the guy I got him from cracked the bottom one for some reason. I don't know how you crack a bottom hi hat. Maybe you've done that.
Well, and the bottom's probably thicker than it would have been from the '60s, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's a good
So
combo.
exactly. So these are the super nerdy things that us session drummers talk about in terms of gear choice, because a lot of people just put up whatever they have and they play it in a studio, and the producer's like, that's not quite right.
Right.
But then when you actually present options and you've thought about those options, um, it makes a big difference. And to me, the wrong set of hi-hats can ruin the groove for a song.
Yeah, well, cymbals are a big one. I change out cymbals almost as much, if not more, as I do snares.
So let me see. I don't have a hi-hat mic on this, but I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
I'll turn the vocal mic off.
Yeah.
But these definitely have that like Al Green sloshy splashy thing.
Yeah.
But they're so thin on top.
Yeah.
You know this kind of cymbal, but for other
yeah.
people, like these are the hi-hats you hear on, I would say, half of the Death Cab tracks. And they're also very fast. I'm going to switch cameras here so that people can
Okay.
see what's going on. So
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
my foot cam. There's my left foot. So if I go back and forth, Star Wars style, between this you can see how much the sound of just my foot
Yeah.
is part of that groove. So like in a song like I'll Possess Your Heart, that
Yeah.
one little lick, if I took out that left foot, it would just sound like this.
Yeah.
But adding the left foot, or to show people the left foot on the foot cam.
Yeah.
And I think again, where that came from was it came from my having to do independence exercises where I would just shift a left foot pattern. So like I would practice keeping the left foot. I would play the E's, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E, and I'd all of a sudden bring the right hand over the hat and the 2 E and the 3 E and the 4 E and. But then I started to key into like the difference between shoulder hits, tip on top. I mean,
Yeah.
you know all this, Jerry. This
Oh
is
yeah.
for anyone that's listening, but
And that's why I use the ball tip, because I use the SD4 combo. It's the same kind of deal.
use the SD4 stick.
Sometimes I used
Are you
3 different
serious?
sizes. Yeah.
Okay, for anyone that doesn't know super nerdy drum gear talk, an SD4 stick is a maple stick. Most drumsticks are hickory,
Yeah.
and maple is much lighter, and it's super quiet. So that's really revealing to me that you would use an SD4, a lighter, smaller stick. But I think that's genius. I've done the same thing, and it was the same. Not saying I'm genius, but that's the same stick I used on "I Will Possess Your Heart" as we're talking
Right.
about that groove.
Right. Because so this is a 5B, and that's what I use most of the time. So the switch off from this, like,
Yeah, and
yeah, it's
I know people can hear that, and that's again, I've been in the studio and had an engineer. I'm sure you've done the same thing. I've had someone behind the glass, as we refer to engineers as the behind the glass a lot of the times when
yeah,
we're
yeah.
making records. I've had someone say, "Can you pick a different ride cymbal that's brighter?"
Right.
And so
You just pull out the maple stick.
you
It
pull out a
definitely,
different stick, and it's a different weight, it's a different density, and it changes the sound. So
yeah,
I think the weight of cymbals, how we use our, how we think differently about creating grooves, like
yeah,
using all our limbs, not just letting a left foot hang out there.
yeah,
The weight of the cymbals, how fast they are, the size of them, for any non-technical drummers, these hi-hat cymbals, they have 10-inch hats, they have 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Sometimes people put on even bigger ones or two crash cymbals together. These are all in our vocabulary. These are in our repertoire. These are things that we go to. Like if you think about it, the a language, if you're a poet, you're searching for, you have a vast knowledge and vocabulary, but
yeah,
really it's just a handful of the right words that make all
right.
the difference, that make something poetic.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Um,
I was
some
happy to discover the maple thing. It was Bill Bruford, one of my biggest influences. I was like, he plays maple sticks. What's the deal? So
Does anyone know who Bill Bruford is? I'm gonna wait and see if it pops up in the comments. Someone will know who Bill Bruford is. Yeah,
yeah,
and he played them backwards, right?
yeah, a lot of
Yep.
the time. But
Always a bend in the snare drum note. It's amazing.
yep, yep, big
Um,
time.
I'm looking at some other comments because I want to see if there's any questions that we can answer for people here. Have you poked around and seen any questions yet?
Somebody asked about influences, I think,
Bill
which
Bruford,
is,
there you
yeah.
go.
That's the first record I ever remember playing along to is Red by King Crimson.
Wow.
My dad got that for me, and also a drummer friend uh, he gave me a cracked Paiste China that he used to have, so I could immediately play that album. Yeah.
Amazing. Do you remember when you made the transition from learning drums early on to finally creating with drums?
Well, you start.
From learning drums to creating parts. I think for me, I spent at least 5 or 6 years trying to play like the records that I heard.
Yeah.
And then I specifically remember being like 17 years old and going to a practice space that was in an office building. My dad had this warehouse, and there was like a foyer, like an entrance, and I would go and pack my drums in a car and drive them over there at night after I'd done homework or whatever.
Yeah.
Finish school, and I would set up and I would play, and I had this goal every time I sat down to play something that I've never heard.
Mm-hmm.
So like it was just a different approach. So like I will never forget. It's funny how these things stick with you. I was listening to, for some reason I got into jazz and Afro-Cuban,
Right.
and I came up with this phrase that has stuck with me forever. I haven't used it in anything, but here's an example of me wanting to sit down and play something that I've never played before or that I've never heard.
Yeah.
And it's in 3/4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. just a weird, like, I mean, you can hear the pulse in a little bit, but like, of course, it hasn't found a song yet because Death Cat would be like, dude, I don't know what that is. Okay, next.
Right. Well, you just
But
have to start your own band now.
right, but the point is that I had already sat down and gone, and so forth. And same thing with hi-hat playing. Like I think I was messing with technique one time on a hi-hat, and all of a sudden I was flopping the stick around, and then there was a new thing that I was doing. So
Yeah.
I think being creative and searching for things for me started when I was maybe 5 or 6 years into drumming.
On my end, it's actually this will be equal parts sad and sappy, but I was born into the industry of session playing, so it really wasn't about creating as much as it was about recreating basically using a template, a pre-established template, to make recordings for other people, and that spilled over into my bands too. Every band I was ever in from here were dudes that grew up in the same environment, very technically accomplished, but we'd always be kind of chasing something in
Mm-hmm.
some way. And it really wasn't until this band I'm in now that I feel like I kind of let go of a lot of that stuff and just did whatever I wanted. Um, so there were creative bits in there, and I was allowed to kind of get out, but it was always like it being the job and it being my profession. It was never really I was never able to think of it as that. There was always some sort of limit or like lane to be in.
Right.
But yeah, my sort of my favorite thing, like, because I just play these songs that Buick writes, and she's open to everything, and in a lot of ways was really hard on me for being fairly pedestrian in the beginning of our, a lot of our songs for a while were, and that's fine, but it was on Bill, the second song, first single, Horrify, where it never hits on a downbeat ever. The that's still like my favorite thing to play ever. It is a nightmare. It's really hard to get through because
Dude, we're done here. You just made me look so bad.
this
No.
that can never stop, or
Uh-oh.
the whole song falls apart.
Oh, I
How'd you
lost
get
my
unplugged?
feed to Jerry. Hold on a sec, everybody. I can't hear you.
Yeah.
I just got so excited I unplugged my headphones.
That's
Sorry.
all right. I understand.
We're good. So as you were saying, that's your favorite thing to play. That's
Yeah.
That's a super creative part.
Thank
But
you.
obviously, those parts don't work for everything.
Right.
And I feel like my role in Death Cab has always been to thread the needle between uh, something that you could air drum,
Yeah.
having never played the drums, that's supportive of the song. But then there's also some more complicated things. Like, I want to answer a question someone asked about the end of what Sarah said. They asked if it's a Flam 6, I think. How do you accent or articulate it? What Sarah said, totally, it's like two different parts, right? Two different songs almost. And I actually do describe this in a lesson that will be out into the world at some point in a lot more detail. But since we're here and somebody asked, a lot of the rudimental drumming that I've studied, um, mostly Scottish stuff, involves a lot of flam exercises. So there's one called the Flam 6 that this person's asking about, which is a flam, for people that don't know, is there's a grace note and then a louder note.
Right.
Okay, so a Flam 6 is like a grace note, wrist rebound. Total of 6 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's like a double paradiddle but backwards.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it switches to the left side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I do it between the ride and the snare. And a person was just asking how I articulated it. Really, it's just being heavy on the downbeats.
Yeah.
That's all. If I played it without accents, it would sound like this. But I play it with more of an emphasis on the downbeat. Stick drop. You know what's funny? I always think about whether I will ever drop a stick in the end of that song, and I think it's happened once.
Yeah.
But it does happen. If I slow it way down, just like that, and there's a heel splash, because once we talked about those hi-hats, of course, they're always in there in some way, shape,
Yeah.
or form.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is that. And I will go into that kind of stuff in detail. You guys will all be seeing something soon enough. Jerry, do you see any of the questions in here that you would care to answer?
Oh man, favorite drummers.
Oh, I see one here. I have a really hard time playing with intensity the way Jerry seems to. It's quite admirable. I
Yeah.
agree. And like I was mentioning early on in this episode, like I've seen you play super quiet and laid back. Like a person could have a conversation in a coffee shop, and then I've seen you throw down super hard. Like there was a question earlier about playing on pillows and developing endurance and technique. What do you do? Have you ever given any thought to like building muscle and being able to hold intensity?
Uh, when in about 2009 or 2009 or 2010, I got called to do a punk rock record, like a classic, like Descendant style punk rock record. Um, and I had to do 10 songs in one day, and I was destroyed afterwards. And I'd never really endeavored to exercise or do anything my whole life. I just kind of coasted. But that at that point, I decided that I was going to start lifting weights and eating better, and that really helped everything. And it really helped being able to like sit still, and because when you're playing quiet, you kind of have to, gild yourself, just like sit, be quiet, so you don't trip or fall, and just have like a good balance going. So
Right.
having like core strength and having arm strength, because speed is strength, really, at the end of the day, they're about the same thing. Um, really helped quite a bit.
Let that not be a myth.
Yeah,
It's true.
it is true.
Sign of a good drummer. The sign of a good drummer is restraint. I agree. I
Yeah,
I would I would I am so excited when I see a drummer play
yeah,
that I can tell could do so much more, but they're super content with what they're providing for the music in the song.
yep,
It almost keeps you baited. It's like going to a demo derby and waiting for that spectacular crash or flip or jump or whatever. I mean, not that like I go to a lot of demo derbies. I don't know why
right.
that just popped into my head, but it's just waiting for those moments. I think there's way more intoxication in being patient and holding back
Yeah,
greatness than like just spewing it everywhere you go. You
and
know.
in this, to the same end of restraint, sometimes the fill that everybody does really is the right one. you know.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to do several to find the right one.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, okay, I have another question for you. I want to transition to this because it's relative to what's happening right now. I was in Nashville when you guys had the tornado recently. You and I were both there, right?
yeah, yeah.
We talked the next day, and it was devastating, and it was incredible, and so much loss in terms of real estate in the community, and a few lives. But you guys seemed to rebuild overnight. It really seemed like you reached out community wise, and I know you and your wife were doing work in the community and helping people out. I know that like
Well, Buick specifically, she made something like 170 sandwiches for North Nashville. Got hit really hard,
yeah,
and no one paid attention to them because it's a impoverished neighborhood. So the whole story was about East
right,
Nashville, but
right,
North Nashville is really, it got the most concentrated damage and like housing damage. And I was busy with work. Buick was really out helping as much as possible, and that is kind of a Nashville hallmark. Crime goes down, help goes up,
of course.
and we had more. So many volunteers had done the work before the professionals who were supposed to do the work got there to do it, that they ended up just going home.
So I was there the
Yeah,
day that I don't know how many, close to 1,000 first responders, Red Cross, FEMA. There was a bunch of people that were showing up, and the people that I knew who were local,
yeah,
like Buick, like yourself, yeah, had done already so much work in the
yeah,
community that like the wood was stacked, the trees were cut.
yeah,
People went out and bought chainsaws and gloves. I mean, I went to Home Depot, same thing, to see if I could help a little while I was there, and there was no gloves, there was no tools, there was nothing left.
yeah,
And I mean, I also realized that it wasn't, I was too late basically. Like everyone had already stepped up and done their thing. So,
yeah.
I mean, I just want to applaud the community, and I mean, I have nothing but mad love and respect for Nashville. But I wanted to segue into asking you about where we're at right now in terms of the music industry, the business, the fact that tours are canceled, people are holding back on making records.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that you're being safe about it, but you're also really wanting to get back to work and continue to make music and records, and you're doing it from home, but I know you're going to go back into the studio soon. I mean, do you have faith that Nashville's music scene isn't going to have any kind of a hiccup, that it's going to continue to,
Well, without live, I know streaming's up across the board,
right?
and what makes it interesting is that filming is shut down, so you can still currently make music, but you can't shoot a TV show or a film. And I don't really know when that's going to be able to start. So it seems like music is moving back to the front, as Metallica would say, um, as far as like priority of entertainment is concerned, which is good news.
As long as you won't die,
Right. So, I mean, Nashville's definitely the recording hub of the US, and
of course,
I think it will stay that way. There's no way it isn't going to be less than it was. I'd be surprised if it wasn't,
right?
but it'll still be here. I think it was going to move that way anyway, so who knows?
Do you think that the sound of records? So historically, you could go back and study music, even drums. You could study. I can tell you when there's a 1980s Yamaha recording custom being
Right.
tracked. Right? There's a
Yeah.
specific sound of that drum set. There's a specific sound of guitar amps from the 80s.
Yeah.
Whatever. There's definitely, you know Zach Ray from Death Cab and Dave Depper are always like calling out synthesizers as soon as they hear it. They don't
Yeah.
need to see it; they just recognize the sound. Do you think that sonically, as much as there's been a timestamp on equipment, there's also been a timestamp on recording platforms? The first digital recording sound
Yeah.
terrible.
Right.
Do you think that there's going to be a timestamp on any of the music that comes from Nashville because of the transition from Sound Emporium or larger studios in Nashville to some of the work that people are doing in smaller studios, especially if this keeps up?
It's interesting to think about. Um, Everything is there's like so much sound replacement and reamping anyway that
True.
it's hard to tell. I mean, records could end up sounding better.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
uh,
yeah, it's interesting. I
yeah,
mean, I've been listening nonstop to the new Fiona Apple record, and so much that was done just independently between herself and uh, Amy Wood and Sebastian, and I feel like those sounds might not have been realized the same way had they not been doing it on their own. And that was before, obviously, a bunch of us were forced to get together. But I think a lot is to be learned and experienced from what we're going through right now. Hence,
yeah,
you talking about the learning process and learning curve of changing your mic placement
yeah.
and being able to relax because of how you're monitoring hearing things. So
What's interesting, I think you'll hear people sounding more like themselves. Like their tones will be more
I
their
think you're right.
particular liking. It'll be less of a sort of all for all parties type of thing,
Yeah.
and I like that about it. But
Um, well, man, I think we're starting to run out of time here and wrap. We only have so many time before this portal into our worlds will close and die. But is
yes,
there anything else that you wanted to talk about or bring up, or anything you want to talk about with your band, or like Friendship Commander's plans? Like,
well, so we have our new EP out. We are going to be live streaming concerts because thankfully we have the studio and we're a duo and we live together. So we're not breaking any social distancing rules. So we'll be doing
oh,
that.
It's going to
soon.
be in sync too.
Yeah, it will be.
we don't. I don't have that option. I would love to get together with my bandmates and play a show right
Right.
now, but it
Yeah.
just it would sound like shreds. It
Yeah.
just would not be good.
I mean, I could not have been prepared for how much I miss playing live with my band. I will never take it for granted again. It's a very spiritual experience, and it's awful to not be able to play live. But
Tell me
that's
about it.
gonna be that's gonna be coming up a lot. Hopefully, we'll be back on the road soon. I'm sure we'll have some new music coming out sometime in the fall or next year. Buick has a solo record coming out too that I played on. It's probably gonna be next year. As a drummer, uh, the thing that I've been most interested in, what we talked about with playing to a click track and songs that shouldn't play to a click. One thing, this band, Car Bomb, one thing they do very well.
There's been a lot of comments about Car
Yeah,
Bomb.
they treat time as elastic, and that time being the same throughout a song is not the way it should be. And I've kind of always felt that way. Um, so I do think there is something to be said for reapproaching the way we think about time, because I know in our debut, the first single from our new EP, the chorus unilaterally drops 4 BPM every time it starts, which wasn't really intended. But we don't ever track with a click. We've not done a one Friendship Commanders recording to a click track, and that's just what felt right. And
I get it.
yeah,
No, I think it should breathe too. Plus, I feel like I have learned over the years that you hear all the subtle changes when someone is trying to follow a click.
yeah,
Like it's one thing to have such good time that it disappears. But I feel like time doesn't sound as confident when someone is like constantly, if this is the click, you're playing down here and then you're coming up here and then you're dropping down here again and eventually you
yeah,
you wind up on the beat. But I feel like the well, to back up a little bit, the feel of music is better if you're not following something else.
right.
If you're actually just following your own internal clock. So again, I mean, we have to play with the click. We have to understand how to do this stuff.
And
We're going to work
sometimes
with other people.
it's the right way, and the only way a record can happen
Yeah,
circumstantially.
true,
But
true.
yeah,
Especially when you're not in the same room.
right. Yeah.
uh, anyway, look, I think that's a good place to end. I think you've given lots of great advice. I think that people getting a peek into your world and what you do and how diverse you are is something I've been wanting to see for a long time because you're so busy working that you don't have time to do this stuff. So thank you very much, Jerry, for taking time to share what you're doing
Thanks for
and
having me.
also asking me a few questions.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we didn't get to more questions, but we have an agenda, and I always want to get some info out of the people that I'm talking to first. So anyway, thank you again for tuning in to episode 5, Refuge of Practice with Jerry Roe. Please check out Friendship Commanders and Buick Audra's new solo record.
Yeah.
And thanks again, man. I look forward to talking to you in another day or two.
Yes. I'll
Let's
be
stay in
here.
touch. All
I'll
right.
be here.
I know you will be. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
We're good.